The system cannot contact a domain controller to service the authentication request. When you log into a Windows 11 domain joined machine and try to connect to the already mapped drive, or multiple client workstations are unable to correctly authenticate to the server and fail with the error message "the system cannot contact a domain controller to service the authentication request," then this post intended to help you with solutions to the problem. The system cannot contact a domain controller to service the authentication request. Please try again later. This error message usually indicates the client machines can't reach a domain controller for authentication and almost always points to incorrect DNS settings, DHCP not configured correctly or statically set incorrectly, $#, that is what I means $#, mixing DC and non-DC DNS addresses, or routing issues. This typically could be due to the following. The domain controller is offline due to maintenance or power outage. Network issues if the client device is not correctly configured to establish communication with a domain controller, or if there are issues in the network. Host server issues if a domain controller is a virtual machine. If you get the message "the system cannot contact a domain controller to service the authentication request" in the Enter Network Credentials dialog when you try to connect or authenticate a client machine to a Windows Server machine, then the suggestions presented below can help you resolve the network authentication issue. Flush DNS. Unjoin and rejoin the client machine to the domain. Additional troubleshooting. 1. Flush DNS. If the system cannot contact a domain controller to service the authentication request error occurs, you can first flush the DNS from the server and client machines, then restart the DNS server service. Afterward, you can check the event logs and make sure no events have been logged. Read, your DNS server might be unavailable in Windows 11. 2. Unjoin and rejoin the client machine to the domain. There might be several causes why some machines may not be able to authenticate. It could be related to AD token expiration during the time that was not able to authenticate. This solution simply requires that you unjoin and then rejoin the affected client machines to the domain. So, this entails putting the client machines in a workgroup and rebooting, then removing the computers in AD and re-enroll them in the domain. An Active Directory Domain Controller (ADDC) for the domain could not be contacted. 3. Additional troubleshooting. If you're experiencing this issue after resuming from hibernation, take a look at the network connection state by pointing the cursor at the network icon in the system tray. If the appeared tip doesn't contain your domain name, that's the reason for the error. In this case, you can disable and re-enable the network adapter in Device Manager or unplug it and then plug back the in 10 seconds network cord. How do I troubleshoot AD authentication problems? If you are having AD authentication problems, as part of the process of troubleshooting Active Directory, you can do the following. Run diagnostics on domain controllers. Test DNS for signs of trouble. Run checks on Kerberos. Examine the domain controllers. Active Directory uses Kerberos to authenticate communication on the domain. Therefore, your AD server must accept this authentication type as well. If Kerberos stops working, then the authentication process breaks down. How do I force domain controller authentication? To force a client to validate its logon against a specific domain controller, do the following. Open Registry Editor. Navigate to the path below. HKEY_local_machine, system, current control set, services, NetBT, parameters.